Yeah, the Maracanã I have mixed feelings about. One big thing that really impressed me was singing on all four sides of the ground. Yeah, so another thing is that Brazil is so high-tech, much more of a sort of family and a community thing. If there's anything I've missed, if anything got wrong, I come in peace, just tell me, I want to learn more. So I've just been to 5 Brazilian football matches in a week. I'm an English football journalist. I want to tell you about those matches, what I learned about Brazilian football, about Brazilian culture, about Brazilian life. Just overwhelmingly positive things, to be honest. I've had an amazing time here. Clearly like the greatest football country in the world. I'm here on Flamengo Beach, and that's actually Sugarloaf Mountain behind me. I went up there, great little day out. But yeah, here on Flamengo Beach, people kicking footballs around, of course. Nice place, a lot quieter than Copacabana and Ipanema, so I thought a good place to make this little video. So I'll talk you through my trip to Brazil, the 5 games I went to, and sort of what I thought about it all. I should say, by the way, that my name's Joey D'Urso. I'm a football journalist in England. I cover football, politics, culture, all those things. I recently wrote a book called More Than a Shirt. I was actually interviewed by A Globo, which is Brazil's biggest daily newspaper. Having a great time on my first ever trip to Brazil. So I started off in Santos, and a few Brazilians were kind of like, why are you going to Santos? Because it's a bit of a backwater, really. It's like a small little city. I landed in São Paulo airport on whatever it was, Tuesday night, and I got a cab there. It's like 2 hours in the Uber to Santos, which was, it's not a beautiful place. It's kind of maybe a strange introduction to Brazil, because it's not Copacabana Beach, Christ the Redeemer, or, the rainforest, whatever else people think about Brazil. It's a sort of, not a beautiful city. It reminded me a lot of sort of a small Spanish city, maybe. But yeah, I was there because of football, because of Pelé, of course, and Neymar, is why I'm completely fascinated by Santos. I remember as a kid reading books about the Brazilian team of 1958, 1962 and 1970, and Pelé as a star player, the first sort of Brazilian superstar, to many people the greatest footballer of all time. So I went to the Pelé Museum, and I went to a game at Santos. They drew 1-1 with São Paulo. It was strange actually being in the Vila Belmiro. It was just like, it was really small. It's a 16,000 seater stadium, and it wasn't even full. The atmosphere was pretty good. I met some of the sort of torcida de vermelho outside. It was pretty loud, but it wasn't a big game. It was like an early game in the Paulista, the state championship. But it was great to see. For me, it's just such an iconic name, Santos, not just because of Pelé, but also because of Neymar Jr., who's playing there now, who's returned, after his career at Barcelona, at PSG, and briefly in Saudi, although he was always injured. An outside bet for the upcoming World Cup squad. He was unfortunately injured, so I didn't see Neymar play. But enjoyed my trip to Santos. It was definitely a good introduction to Brazilian football, and good to, see somewhere a bit different that tourists maybe don't. My second game, then went to São Paulo for a few days. I went to the Estádio Morumbi, which is probably the second most famous stadium in Brazil. It's kind of old. It's it's got so much character to it, is what I'd say, and it's got this huge running track around it, which doesn't help in terms of atmosphere. And São Paulo, they had Lucas Moura playing, who I know from England, playing for Tottenham, who kind of looked like the best player on the pitch, as you might imagine. But São Paulo did not play well. They conceded an early goal against Primavera, another Paulista team, and they did come back to win 2-1, but it was certainly relief rather than glee at the end. But the Morumbi, it felt old. It felt like a relic, but not in a bad way. It felt like a piece of Brazilian football history, which it really is. I was reading the history of a Fluminense flag being carried from Rio to São Paulo to this booming city. Rio is a much older city than São Paulo, but São Paulo is bigger, and a place that was just booming in the sort of mid-20th century, and has such a strong football culture. This stadium, the Morumbi, really matters hugely to that. The third game I went to, I'd say, was probably the highlight, which was Corinthians, at the Arena Corinthians, which is an amazing modern stadium. I think it was established for the 2014 World Cup, and they host NFL games there, so it was really kind of top spec. It's by far the most high spec stadium I went to in Brazil. Well, I'll come on to the Maracanã, but I absolutely love that. I think this is probably going to maybe offend some people, but I think I would say I'm a Corinthians fan now after going to that game. If I were to have to choose a Brazilian team, it was such an amazing atmosphere. It was the Derby Paulista. It was against Palmeiras, and so that generated an incredible atmosphere, as you can imagine. Tifos, fireworks, all sorts. But Corinthians lost. They lost 1-0. And Memphis Depay, who I know from England, played for Manchester United, missed a penalty. But I absolutely loved that. That was a real highlight of my trip. Another thing, I'll come on to my big reflections about Brazilian football, but the thing I noticed is the importance of this Champions of the World thing. So São Paulo FC, Champions of the World 3 times, and I saw around Champions of the World 2005, and I, in my ignorance, thought that was just them being grandiose about winning the Libertadores, but actually Liverpool, of course, won the Champions League in 2005, European, with that amazing comeback against AC Milan. But yeah, Sao Paulo beat them in a game in Japan, and 2 Brazilians and South Americans. These this World Champions thing means so much, you know, and now yeah, we've got the Club World Cup. But yeah, the Corinthians beat Chelsea in 2012, which is a big one. I mean, now, like, the European teams do tend towards beat South American teams, just because there's so much more money. But I think this is a really strong time for Brazilian football. You know, Flamengo, there's loads of money, so maybe that could change. But it definitely made me think again about my sort of, I guess, European dismissiveness towards these world competitions, because they don't mean much, frankly, to people in Europe. The domestic leagues mean more, the Champions Leagues means more, but I think here they really do mean so much, and I think yeah, it just makes me take it a bit more seriously, I guess. And I think it would be really special if a Brazilian team or a South American team won it sometime soon. I mean, if it was to be a South American team, it would almost certainly be a Brazilian team, because Brazilians are absolutely dominating South American football at the moment. 7 consecutive Libertadores wins. Rio itself has 4 consecutive Libertadores wins, Flamengo, Botafogo, Fluminense. Yeah, so the next day I went to was in Rio, so I'm going to Rio for a few days. Obviously an absolutely incredible place here during Carnaval, which is pretty special. But yeah, the first game was Vasco da Gama, which is the sort of traditionally working class club of Rio. Not the most glamorous or whatever else, but, you know, a real soul and character to it, right on the outskirts of town. Yeah, getting there maybe felt a little bit more on edge than I have elsewhere in Brazil, obviously because it's, you know, a poorer part of town or whatever else, and that's totally understandable. But yeah, I got in there, it was all very safe, and I had a great time, and it's a real, yeah, ultras. It was really impressive, and I think the ground was maybe half full, and like 10-12,000 out of 20-24, and in England that would generally mean like a really bad atmosphere, but in Vasco it was impressive. It was noisy. Yeah, it was really cool. It definitely felt like, you know, sort of proper like working class community club, less of the sort of elites that follow the other ones. But yeah, that's a pretty cool thing to see. So, and also as an Aston Villa fan, seeing some former players like Philippe Coutinho and Douglas Luiz that passed through Vasco. That was interesting to see as well. I got myself a Coutinho cup. I love those cups, by the way. They sell everywhere in Brazil, these plastic cups, and they all sort of the same size, so they like fit together. So I've got like 4 or 5 of them. Yeah, so I had a good time at Vasco, and my final game was, yeah, the one I've been looking forward to the most. It was at the Maracanã, which is just the most iconic football name in the world, the most famous football stadium in the world. You know, you'll go to like a 5-a-side league in England, and they'll be called like Wembley, Stade de France, Bernabeu, Maracanã. Or you'd be like playing football in your back garden as a kid in England and sort of pretending you're at the Maracanã. It's just the most iconic stadium. And I, of course, know all about the history of 1950 and Brazil not winning the World Cup, which is the Maracanã, so the huge disaster. But it's the kind of founding story of modern Brazil, the origin story of modern Brazil, because Brazil got their act together, they ditched the white shirts they wore that day for yellow shirts, and then won the 3 World Cups, 58, 62, 70, which are not just part of Brazilian football history, they're part of Brazilian, you know, modern Brazil's history, this sort of confident global power, this sort of multi-ethnic, multi-racial superpower with black players like Pelé at the forefront of it. It's just getting really crowded. I think I can walk through here. Yeah, so the Maracanã is the sort of origin story of modern Brazil. I'm really, really interested in as someone who's fascinated by, you know, history and politics as well as football itself. Yeah, and the game was a kind of Rio derby. It was Fluminense against Botafogo. Not, you know, the big derby, which would be Fluminense against Flamengo. But yeah, still a big one. And there was, yeah, and luckily I have a friend from England, Mauricio, who's a huge Fluminense fan. So I was there in the Sector Sul with them, you know, wanting to join the chants, but I don't speak Portuguese. But I was really enjoying it as a spectator. Yeah, the Maracanã I have mixed feelings about, because on the one hand, it's so iconic. From the outside, that sort of concrete hulk is so familiar from watching, I don't know, the 2014 World Cup on TV, just watching grainy videos as a kid. But also like the sort of iconic Brazilian architecture, right? Like, you know, the sort of Brasilia, those sort of concrete curved buildings is so Brazilian. And yeah, just, you know, one to tick off, right? I've watched football at the Maracanã. I'm very happy I can say that. The sort of flip side is that on the inside, it felt so generic. It felt like it had been asked to host the World Cup final in 2014, and FIFA had given it this huge list of demands for the best media centres, and, you know, the concourses are really good and it's so easy to get a beer and the toilets are nice and all those sorts of things, but it just felt a bit characterless and featureless. And I kind of worry that, you know, it's probably exactly the same as the equivalent in Johannesburg and in Russia, that FIFA wants everything to look the same now, and World Cups increasingly do kind of just look the same on TV, whereas if you go back further in time, you know, in 1978 in Argentina, you had all the ticker tape, and in, I don't know, Italia 90, the stadiums look so familiar, and this is before I was born. But yeah, this sort of homogenization of football, yeah, I do think it's a shame. And Maracanã on the inside, I mean, it was half full, right? It was 78,000 capacity, and there were 40,000 there, so that obviously doesn't help. And it was a good atmosphere, you know, it was a really impressive atmosphere for a less than half full probably stadium. But yeah, the Maracanã I have mixed feelings about. And you know, I was speaking to someone who was saying that back in the day you'd be having like chicken slaughtered in the Maracanã while the game is going on and all this kind of stuff, and it was just such a living, breathing part of Brazilian sort of street culture, which it just isn't anymore. But let me tell you about the sort of thoughts, the sort of overarching thoughts I had about the whole experience, watching football in Brazil. So I think the sun is basically setting as I'm taking this video, which definitely wasn't planned, but I'll take it. Anyway, so my first big takeaway is that I'm actually going to walk on the actual beach because there's loads of people coming up and it's kind of noisy, and I'll also be less nervous about someone grabbing my GoPro. It's not a GoPro, DJI Osmo Pocket 3, represent. One big thing that really impressed me was singing on all four sides of the ground. And this is something that I think about a lot in England. I go to watch Aston Villa, I watch all sorts of other teams in England, and you rarely see, it's like the singing section, the standing section. I hope you can hear those waves. I hope they don't ruin the audio of this video. The singing section, the standing section, you know, the hardcore are like kind of one little section of the ground. But in Brazil, you rarely get singing on the kind of long sides of the ground. It tends to be kind of the posh seats, the families, whatever else. But in Brazil, particularly at the, like, you know, the Corinthians, the derby, you saw like all four sides of the stadium just like bouncing up and down, singing. And there's such a kind of varied songbook, which, yeah, just really impressed me. I thought that was really cool. I wish we had more of that in England. Should have a look at this again. So that's, yeah, Sugarloaf, Ruango Beach in Rio. Yeah, so another thing is that Brazil is so high tech, which I don't know, maybe sort of patronizingly, arrogantly didn't realize, like more high tech than anywhere I go in Europe. I was in Germany the other week and everything is in like cash. I didn't have cash and it was like a big problem. Brazil, no one uses cash. Even like tiny little street vendors or you know, like beach shacks, they accept card or Pix, which is their sort of electronic payment system, which is everywhere. But also to go to matches in Brazil, you need to scan your facial biometrics, so like your face is your ticket, and that's a sort of safety thing, you know, like hooliganism and to enforce various bans and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's quite like really sort of futuristic. Just you look at the scanner and then you're entered. It's quite a pain to navigate as a foreigner. Luckily, with some sort of journalist connections, I managed to do it and got into all the matches I wanted to, but it wasn't always that easy. Yeah, but yeah, Brazil's so high tech, the cashless thing. Also, like I visited a friend's apartment building, and the scanner, the key is your face, and like everything asks for your CBF. Is that the right acronym? Your government tax number. Yes, that was another big reflection on Brazil. I think Brazil, in general, it's very like modern. It's very high tech. I don't know what the stereotypes are. I certainly like was very worried about crime before I arrived, which I think a lot of Brazilians are sort of. You know, they acknowledge that there are issues and there are definitely big problems, but I think it's maybe not as bad as the stereotype, as the stereotypes would have you indicate. There are obviously parts of cities that as a tourist you simply would never go to. But you know, I'm on a beach, it's a busy beach, and it's turning dusk, and I feel very comfortable holding my relatively expensive bit of equipment. You know, and if this video ever does get uploaded and you see it, then that shows that it didn't get robbed. But yeah, I feel pretty confident about that right now. So yeah, I think, yeah, I would certainly tread carefully with that issue in future about Brazil and crime. It feels like a sensitive one. It feels like a big stereotype, which there is some truth in. But yeah, a lot of people said to me, like, people get their phones snatched in London all the time, right? Which is true. Like, never happened to me, but so many of my friends have had their phones snatched, and I am careful with my phone in Brazil on the metro, which I've used loads and it's been fine. But yeah, certainly not as certainly not as bad as I thought it would be, basically. It's something to bear in mind. The third point I want to make about Brazilian football is that the standard in general was like really pretty good. I wouldn't say amazing, like certainly not as good as the top European leagues, but I think Brazilian football is like on the up. There's a lot of money going into it, partly because a lot of sales to Europe, which has also been which has always been a huge thing for Brazil. But as you know, as sort of the Premier League just goes up and up and up, like Ryan went from Vasco da Gama to Bournemouth. Like, it's not just the biggest clubs paying big transfer fees now, particularly in England. Like, a lot of the clubs who are not massive international names are paying huge transfer fees, and that's really greases the wheels of Brazilian football. There's also a lot of betting money coming in, which is something that I've covered and written about a lot. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing, but it's certainly giving money into Brazilian football. And if you look at Libertadores, if you look at the performance of certainly Fluminense in the Club World Cup, Brazilian football was at pretty high level, and most of the football watch was pretty good. A couple of people told me that Brazilian football has a reputation of jogo bonito and beautiful football and incredible skills and attacking, and that's actually not true. And a lot of the time in the league it's very defensive, or has been certainly in recent years. But there's also been an influx of foreign coaches, which I think has made a big difference. Lots of Portuguese, lots of Argentinian, just new ideas, new ways of doing things. If you look at successful leagues like, I don't know, the Premier League, no English manager has ever won the Premier League, so having those foreign influences can often just sort of raise the game. Yeah, so I certainly I wouldn't say every game I went to was thrilling, there weren't loads of goals, but I was watchable, it was good. It wasn't sort of part of the bus, dogged defensive vibes. So certainly enjoyable as a spectator, alongside all the appreciating the fans and the tifos and whatever else. And another element, which I actually wrote about in my book, is that football in South America and Brazil more broadly feels like much more of a family thing than certainly in England, or can't speak for all of Europe, but it's still very blokey in England. I'd say less so than when I was a kid, more women at games, more children at games. But in Brazil it's so much more female in the stands. So many more really young children. You see tiny little babies. The one game I went to was a 9:30 kickoff, and there was a babe in arms, a tiny baby, just sort of falling in and out of sleep in front of me, which is very adorable and not really something you'd ever see in England. Maybe you would. This was the really noisy bit. So yeah, respect to that baby for being able to sleep through it. Another thing that struck me is women. Usually I'd say when you see women at games, men's games in England, it'd be with a man. It'd be a daughter with a father, or a wife with a husband, or a boyfriend and girlfriend. Not all, of course. Not all, of course. And there are obviously exceptions to that. Women that go with their friends or sisters or daughters or whatever. But I'd say that's probably the majority. I think that's fair to say. Whereas in Brazil, it felt like there were loads of groups of teenage girls together, or mums and kids. Not necessarily with a dad at all. Maybe he was there, maybe he wasn't. But it just felt very normal for women to be, just part of the crowd, part of the community, much more of a sort of family and a community thing than in England, where it still feels pretty macho in the sense. But I mean, the big thing coming down the track is Brazil hosting the Women's World Cup in 2027, which I think there's been some controversy about. I don't think people are, women's football has not taken off in a massive way here. They obviously have had Marta, who is the greatest women's footballer of all time, but the national team, they haven't done very well. And it's women's football has really taken off in England recently, I think because of the success of the Lionesses, because of winning the Euros twice, getting to that World Cup final in Australia in 2023, and that means that these players, Leah Williamson, Alessia Russo, whoever else, are kind of household names. And this current Brazil team doesn't have that. They haven't had that success. So I think if Brazil can do well in that tournament 27, that'll be a huge deal. I think part of the issue is that it's disrupting the men's league for a month, so all the stadiums going to be in use. So I think there's some controversy about that. But it's advertised everywhere, and hopefully people get behind it. But just the fandom feels much more family orientated than what I'm used to in Europe. The fifth thing I said, I actually initially wrote this list out on my Substack, which you can subscribe to. I write sort of a newsletter each week about football, politics, culture. I'm travelling all around the world at the moment. I'm going all over South America. So lots more observations like this about not just football on the pitch, but there's some noisy music there, so I'm going to head closer to the sea. Football observations from around the world. I travel a lot. But the thing I touched on briefly earlier is the sort of safety thing. I've felt pretty safe here the whole time. Taking kind of usual precautions as a foreign traveller who doesn't speak the language. Just being a bit careful, not holding expensive equipment out too much. But it's fine, felt completely safe, completely fine. Had a great time. I'd really recommend coming to Brazil, watching as much football as you can. I mean, it is just the world's greatest football country, right? It's I think nowhere else is football so intertwined with the kind of national spirit and national identity. I've made a video about that, which is about the sort of disaster of 1950 and everything which, it might be on my channel, or I might upload it later. Subscribe so you see it. I've made a bunch of these videos from Brazil. I'm making them from all over the world. Tell me in the comments if I saw some comments about São Paulo FC, 3 times champions of the world, on everything. So big up the São Paulo FC fans. I don't want to pick any fights with anyone. If there's anything I've missed, if there's anything got wrong, I come in peace. Just tell me. I want to learn more. You always just learn more about football culture, certainly about my own football culture in England. People are protective of it. People care about it. And it's easy for foreigners to come in and get something wrong, which isn't what I'm trying to do. I've spoken to so many people here. I've tried to watch. I've tried to listen. I've tried to learn. I've tried to look around me. And I feel like I understand a bit more about Brazilian football now. But yeah, tell me in the comments what else I should know, which other stadiums I should get to. I'd love to go to you know, these other teams like in Salvador or like in the South, Cruzeiro, and wherever else. I'd love to see more of Brazil. I hope I will come back soon. I didn't see enough amazing beaches like this on my trip, to be honest. I've spent a lot of time in cities. But yeah, if you enjoy this, please do like and subscribe, as they say. And thank you very much from Flamengo Beach and from Sugarloaf behind me.